Good evening. Let's give it another round of applause to our wonderful musicians. Thank you, Marianne and Nelson and Pedro. Thank you for gracing us with your music. I'm Miguelina Howell, Dean of Christ Church Cathedral. Delighted to welcome you to our cathedral, to this renovated and flexible space that allows us to engage with arts performances. And welcome to Body and Land. Body and Land is a multidisciplinary performance event that allows us to create space for raising awareness about eco-justice matters, engaging performances and dialogue that bring witness to the importance of creation care. Last night's rendition of Body and Land was fantastic. And I'm sure that today, and has already started, is going to be wonderful. Today's program features our cathedral poet in residence, Dr. Lindsay Rockwell. Right before the pandemic shut down in 2020, Bishop Douglas introduced me to Alde Murphy, who's Lindsay's sister, and to Lindsay via email. And he said something like, "I believe you will find ways to collaborate." Little did we know that throughout the time of pandemic, Dr. Rockwell became our cathedral poet in residence and created a space for us during the time of isolation, in the time of uncertainty, created space for solace to our soul through poetry, and a space for dialogue on social justice matter. To make a long story short, we dreamed together and we came up with the Cathedral Virtual Poetry Night. And a little later, we invited the Racial Healing Justice and Reconciliation Ministry Network to join us in this effort. And now we have offered probably 5 to 6 poetry nights, including one with our guest of tonight, Fungai Tishawangane, whom Dr. Lindsay will present. I am so delighted that after 2.5 years, I'm able to meet Lindsay in person. We have worked together online throughout all this time. And let me introduce her and share a little bit with you about her. As I said before, she's our poet in residence and hosts the Poetry and Social Justice Dialogue series for our cathedral and the network. She has been published and is forthcoming in Connecticut River Review, Amethyst Review, Iron Horse Literary Review, Birmingham Arts Journal, among others. She won first prize in the October Project Poetry Contest in 2020 and the 81st Moon Prize from Writing in a Woman's Voice in 2021. Lindsay also holds a Master of Dance and Choreography from NYU Tisch School of the Arts and is an oncologist. Eclectic? I know, an oncologist who does dance and art and poetry. And I will say that for me, the biggest description about Lindsay is to say that she's such a gentle and thoughtful soul. You are such a gift to us all. And it's good to be, I wish you were like a little fly in the wall when an Episcopal priest and a Buddhist are in conversation. There's a lot of movement of the spirit. Well, without further ado, I introduce to you our poet in residence and the beautiful soul of Dr. Lindsay Rockwell.
Oh my goodness. So tonight is the first time Lena and I are meeting in 3 dimensions. And it was just, my heart just went boom when she walked in the door. So she and I have had quite a collaboration over these past couple of years, and it has been a gift to me to become part of this community. I have the absolute pleasure of introducing Fungai, who is a colleague and a friend who I met through poetry. And I don't think I ever told him this story, but when I was in a workshop with him, in a critique workshop, and I saw this being on Zoom, and this smile and this radiance that I was immediately taken by. I've never told him this, so. So since then, I've kind of been scheming in my own self of ways to collaborate with him. And he was in one of our poetry and social justice dialogue events, which was fabulous and beautifully attended. And then this came up, and I said, oh boy, if I'm fortunate, maybe he's available and maybe he'd be interested, and he's here. So I'm really, really pleased to have this collaboration. So I will tell you a little bit about Fungi. He is the founder of Valley of Writers, a site dedicating to giving writers tools, resources, and ideas to help them succeed. And I know from direct experience that my mentor found a tremendous resource in Fungi and has developed a gorgeous website for Michael. He is originally from Zimbabwe, where he started and ran the leading arts and culture website in the country. In 2015, he was awarded a Nieman Journalism Fellowship at Harvard University. He is passionate about documenting the lives of creatives and helping them succeed by teaching business and technical skills. He writes poetry under the name of Is Mazzano, and you can find his work at ismazzano.com. I'm really excited to have Fungi here tonight.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alyssa Stroth, and I'm the artistic director of Ekklesia Contemporary Ballet and the choreographer of Body and Land, which you're about to see. Tonight's presentation will be a dance and poetry, reading and dialogue. We are going to watch a section, and then we are going to hear the poetry of Lindsay Rockwell and Fungi. We're so excited to hear. And then we're also going to hear the poetry. Well, first we're actually going to hear the poetry of our poet in residence, which goes along with this work, Kwame Blingson. Kwame, would you stand? There are 4 sections of the work, divided by the 4 seasons, and 1 dancer represents each season. I'm going to have the dancers coming out so I can introduce you. Dancers. Here they are. Ooh. They can dance, I promise. Just kidding. We have Sasha Biaggiarelli is representing the season of winter. Hope, yes, welcome. Hope Blackburn is representing the season of spring. Jacob Shoup is representing the season of summer. And Rochelle Stevenson is representing the season of fall. Thank you, dancers. This work of Body and Land is meant to encourage us to feel the changes of climate on both an intellectual and visceral level. The accompanying poetry by Kwame Blingson was written to voice the cries of those who are affected the most. We now present the first season of Body and Land, Winter.
all things being equal. In that first season, outside of Eden, did summer breezes Adam and Eve felt turn newfound freedom frigid? Warm skin was wakened to winter. Now some new beast must offer a piece of itself to give them cover, to shield and keep out the winds of this climate breathing down their necks in the cold light of winter's reality. And, perhaps, out of necessity, his hands found hers, and without words, cold skin soon burned. Continents converged, their sadness, his and hers, sublimated, submerged. Flesh and bone learned how to breathe, how to burn, igniting each breath into new flesh. We learned so little, but gleaned so much from the barren soil, soaked in snow, yet thirsty for more, for water and warmth, for slumberless seed to push, to penetrate, to impregnate the belly, the well we dug together, out of which now flows a fountain of life. The truth we can hide only for so long.
Regret. Remember that lake we walked past yesterday? And the flailing arms we ignored as they sank? That was the last sighting of the voice of reason. We should have saved her while we could.
No Beautiful. Mariupol, Ukraine, March 2022. There'll be no peace for a while, or quiet. The way peace comes with quiet, there'll be none of that for a while. There'll be no steady hand to mend her shattered bowl. There'll be no play for a while, save for the way light plays upon her drawn and sculpted face, now home to oblivion and despair, so far beyond beautiful, I wonder if there'll be no beautiful anymore.
Now we're going to have a chance to have a little dialogue about the poems. My first question is for you, Kwamina. In your poem, the line stands out to me, all things being equal. What is the connection of equality with creation, care, and social justice? And why does this phrase bookend your poem?
Well, contrary to what I said last night, these words sort of sit with you and they percolate, and they, like coffee, they can become more bitter the longer you let it brew. And in a sense, I think, now I think, that line is the first lie in the poem. I guess it's supposed to be ironic, and yet there are moments when it hits you how falsely we speak of equality and truth and equity and humanity, not just in this country, not just on this continent, but on this planet, much like what you were saying in your poem. I think we start out with good intentions, all things being equal, but the reality is they may never have been, but it feels so good to believe that we are capable of it and to believe that somewhere it's happening, but it's not here. And that's all I feel for now.
Thank you. In your poem, Fungi, your poem gives such vivid images. I'm just curious, does it refer to a moment of no turning back for you? Or could you describe kind of what inspired you with that? There's just so many vivid images.
Thank you. A few years ago, 6.5 years ago now, I became a parent for the first time, and now I have 2 children. And the way I started looking at the world totally changed. The sort of decisions I made, I'm an entrepreneur as well, and the sort of risks I used to take in terms of money and going into business changed, right? The way I do things changed. And I started thinking a lot about the world, the earth, the social systems, the economic systems of the world from the viewpoint of my children. And how, when I was their age, how little I knew about what was happening, and totally depended on my parents to decipher it for me. And when I look at all the remnants of injustices that we're dealing with right now, whatever area it is, race, the environment, etc., it's because our parents and our great-great-parents left some unfinished business. And hindsight gives you so much perspective, but sometimes, a lot of times, not the time to fix those things, right? By the time you have hindsight, the time is already gone. So when I wrote that poem, I was thinking about the things that I can fix, so that when my children are my age, they're dealing with other things and not the flailing arms in the lakes that we can see right now, and save and fix. So that was the inspiration behind that poem.
Thank you so much. And after hearing your response, just the last line really stands out to me, just that we should have saved her while we could. I just wanted to repeat that. Lindsay, the use of the phrase for a while against such despair language within your poem really stood out to me. And I was just kind of wondering what if hope had a play in that, like personally, maybe if you had any thoughts on that as you were writing it, like what you hope for, as well as sort of stating in actuality what we're looking at right now.
Thank you. That's a great question. I think when I look at the war in Ukraine and the devastation, it is so utterly complete. And the feeling of despair and oblivion that we are witness to and yet so utterly removed from. And to mention beauty in the midst of that, there is a hope of healing somewhere, even in the midst of such terror and destruction. So wanting to frame it in time dropping into the truth that it is utterly inhumane, and yet we are animals, and this is what we do. But there is a temporal aspect to it, as ultimate as it seems right now. And I struggled with the word beautiful because there is nothing beautiful about war. And yet, forcing the word beautiful into the context of war brings me to my knees in search of these extraordinary human beings who may return to their home, and the extraordinary human beings that are trying to support them in the Poland, housing the refugees, and all of the good, as futile as it may seem.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was thinking of some of the news articles that I've been reading also have mentioned during the time that, and the sunflowers are in full bloom. It's like as if the writers are saying, like, there's beauty around this in creation, yet we're creating this horror on top of it, you know? Yeah.
I had a question for you. I really appreciated the snapshot that your poem was, and it brought to mind so many things. I'm going to try to make it as brief as possible so I can get a response from you. But this week has been one of sort of compounded grief and confrontations as this piece makes us deal with what's actually happening versus what we're willing to acknowledge is happening. And hearing about war in your poetry and then hearing about regret in yours, it reminded me that, have you seen the photograph Napalm Girl from the Vietnam War? So when I was in law school, I studied war crimes and atrocities and lynching, and I just sort of got my fill of all of those things. And that was one of the pictures that always stayed with me, was a little girl who was running down a road in Vietnam after napalm had burned her skin and her clothing off. And I woke up this morning, sent my girls to school. I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old. And what should be on the news but Napalm Girl, now 50-something years old, I think. And she was there with the photographer who took that picture of her. And I was just sort of shaken because she was so articulate, talking about what it was like to live, seeing herself so iconically captured in a moment, and how she hated that picture until she had children. And then she realized why that picture was so important. And I felt like her because once I had my second daughter, there were moments I couldn't look at her because when I saw her, I saw a napalm girl. And I think that idea of regretting what we have heard or what we have seen, I feel like this is the kind of place where we have to ask ourselves, what am I afraid to hear? Because what will it mean for me later on? Or what am I afraid to see? How did you come up with the idea of reason being the victim that we collectively, or maybe you individually at some point, walked away from?
So the idea of the voice of reason in the poem came from a totally different area, and that was listening to political debates here in the US. And I found it so, I don't know if we can be political, but it's not. From an outsider's perspective looking in, I found it really hard to listen to debates where it went beyond what is the issue, but what is my side and how am I going to benefit from it, from the government that positions itself as the leader of democracy in the world, right? Because growing up in Zimbabwe, over and over again, we would have the American government saying, okay, we will give you aid if you do these things to show that you're committed to democracy. will help you out if you do these things to show that you're committed to democracy. So whether or not that was done earnestly, there's a lot at stake here. There's just so much at stake. And sometimes I think that maybe we're not fully aware of what it is that's happening when we take something like, for instance, the environment and how we can see the signs. And instead of having the argument of, okay, what is it that we need to do? The argument is, what is it that I need to do to keep my income flowing, to keep my pockets padded? And so just listening to a number of the debates, I just had this vision of the voice of reason just, disappearing, and no one paying heed to the voice of reason anymore. And what is the voice of reason? It's difficult to even put a hand on what the voice of reason is anymore when when arguments reach a certain level and it's just so divided according to where I stand and where I stand to benefit.
Thank you, everyone, for this amazing discussion. We're now going to move to our next season, the season of spring.
When will we learn how to give birth to better things and not to worse? But truth be told, just how much blood must be spilt before the cry from the ground catches the ear of our guilt and brings new tears to old eyes? Truth be told, the cracks in a glacier keep us awake at night, while crack in dead babies leaves us complacent, light-hearted. Truth be told, we savor the fruit that melts in our mouths, enjoy the tree's juice while tasting stale blood that flows from the roots of graves grimly dug, back when telling truth got lesser men hung or left black and blue, dangled from above, from limbs we could prove were 3/5 human, a little lower than the angels. Truth be told, we do not care because we do not know, because we do not ask, because we do not hope, because we do not care, because, and so it goes.
The Yearning of Spring 2085. Fancies wilt on my windowsill, already folding back to earth. Is this one winter following another? I wanted spring to be wonderful. I was hoping for beams of sun on everything, for undisturbed views through wide open skylights, for lungfuls of sweet atmosphere. I was hoping perchance for petals, for color on open fields, for birdsong on my walks, for life on branches and in streams, for a little bit of green on the sidewalk. But they tell me that was before the poison streaming from ancestral exhausts grayed even the evergreens out. I wanted spring to be wonderful, but that season died when progress was born.
Note to self. I love how branch whittles blue, and everything that splays has roots. That breath arrives from green, and before that, nebula and muons. How snow holds leopard's trace, and day darkens after undressing sun. That arrows don't fly backwards, and wind has no home. How memories glide winged, and kites rely on sky. I love the sound of the word horse, the animal she is, how she scares me, and I feel small, makes me remember I am.
Kwamina, do you think you could talk to us a little bit about why truth be told is used so frequently in your poem?
I think when I was writing it, it was the realization that there were many truths to tell, probably more than I could fit into what I was working on. But even as I was telling some of them, they were ringing hollow. There are truths that we can know and speak out loud and still see that there's no progress towards actually living them. And it felt like each truth that was coming to mind in response to watching the dancing. I didn't have actions of my own or see actions in the world that made those truths meaningful. But it didn't stop me from continuing to say, truth, please be told.
Thank you. Fungi, I just wanted to mention that a connection with your poem. We chose to use the music of Vivaldi juxtaposed with contemporary music to really embody progress, which is mentioned in your poem, because Vivaldi's time was before the Industrial Revolution, and I just wanted to have you just kind of talk about a little bit of how that was. You're kind of writing this amazing, beautiful imagery of just how it was before that progress, you know, and what inspired you? Do you have any, like, times from your childhood that you remember, like, kind of untainted by the progress?
Well, when I wrote the poem, I was thinking more of what spring will look like 60 years from now. Once again, looking through the eyes of my children, I was thinking, okay, when in 2085, my daughter will be in her 60s, what will spring look like for her then? And so that's what inspired the poem, because I think of now, like we go for walks or bike rides as a family, and you still hear the birds. We haven't killed off nature yet, right? It's still, you go out for walks and you still hear the birds, you see green, you know, it's spring now, things are we just been through spring, and there was all this blossoming, this new life. And so there was an imagination of what spring will look like if there is no addressing of some of the ways we're living right now.
Being a parent myself, I often think of that too, because it used to be when school time came in September, it was chilly waiting for the bus. And now when it comes for my kids, it's still, summer just keeps going until, you know, sometimes even October before we feel any cold. So it's interesting, like, to think about how much it's changed, just one generation. Lindsay, one thing that stood out to me in your poem was that the one line that says that arrows don't fly backward and wind has no home. And it just made me think of how an arrow has just that straight direction, if you know what you're doing, probably. And that wind it's just so free. And I thought of how you ended with I am, and I just kind of thought of how uncontained we are, for good or for bad, you know? And I just kind of wanted to hear you comment on that.
You know, I think when I wrote this, I was doing a workshop on paying attention. And it was spring, and the assignments over and over were go, walk, be, you know, in the woods, on the trails, and notice your body, notice the land, notice where you are, notice what is not present, you know. And it was such a fabulous exercise that it became more part of a ritual for me. And a piece of that in noticing, like a day like today where the sky is just on fire and the wind, and that I also feel small. And I remembered a lot my relationship to horses when I was terrified of them, and I still am, and I hope to get over that one day. But that the importance of, for me, and I think this was part of my Buddhist practice also, was the smallness, and yet is there really any difference between being small and being big? And how do I embody both? I don't know if that really answered your question.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? Any questions out in the audience? You can also feel free to ask any questions of the dancers who have been really doing a lot of work and research as well. Yes, okay.
I didn't really understand. I think of spring as a time of, aside from what's going on and how different things look right now, but I think of spring as new life, opening, and I didn't understand why there was the bondage of the what is it, whatever, Yeah, I didn't understand how that correlated with spring. Oh, I didn't use it.
Oh, it's okay. The question was, how did the string correspond with spring? And I think one of the reasons, I'll give you a little backstory of that, is that when we started rehearsing this, we were not able to do any contact because it was during COVID time. And so I was trying to overcome that with the string as being an object we could balance with. And then I felt like it really represented what we have with each season, and that's why you see the projections of the flooding, and what we have in this part of the country is just excessive rain. Like, rain is a part of spring, but it's gone overboard because of climate change. So I wanted to show that, and then I thought of water and just what's in water, the pollution and the things that also, it sort of became symbolic of some of the animal life that are getting trapped in that. So that was just kind of some of the images that came as we were working with it. And dancers, did you want to talk, Hope, do you want to talk a little bit what the string means to you?
Yeah, so I've gotten to know the string along with what Alyssa said with the animals being trapped. That was kind of where I started with it, because it was a very visceral image, like the sea turtles getting trapped in plastic. But as I kind of progressed, I found some metaphors that really resonated with me, and that was kind of like picking up the string from the ground, looking at the earth and feeling the brokenness of our relationship with it, and how spring does come from the ground, but even though it is such a season of life still, the feeling of what have we done with this earth, and how it's broken and getting entangled in it's also like our relationship with the earth and getting ourselves entangled in it, I guess. So that's what I was thinking of.
Thank you, Hope. Yeah, it's a little messed up. Yeah. Okay, well, now we're going to go to the season of, one more question. Thank you.
This could wait till later. In fact, maybe it's better if it waits till later. But I'm wondering, of the poets, I hear so much both hope and love and fondness of the memories of the health and beauty of our planet and of our relationship with it and with each other. And I also hear so much despair of death and destruction. I'm wondering where you see, is there a balance in all of this, or where do you see the outcome? That's a pretty big question, but maybe we should wait until after we've gone through the seasons. I don't know if they want to talk about this now.
I feel that the outcome is this. These gatherings, these conversations, these, truth be told, I love that refrain, do we ever get to the truth? And if we don't come together and speak our truths and be awkward and be vulnerable and be wrong, then how do we build community? So I think where I find solace and energy is in events like this that expand our sense of community. And I love, hearing the dancers' voices and thinking about you and how all of this comes together. This is good.
I heard recently, I can't remember where I heard it from, but just someone was talking about how prayer has to be two-handed, and we can't just pray prayers where it's just talking about all the good things and all the things that we're grateful for, which is wonderful, and we totally should do that. We have to hold all the things that are not going well, the truths, the things that are happening, the sorrow, and real prayer is putting those hands together. And I think that's what we're doing in these spaces is in community, coming together with the things that bring us joy and the things that bring us grief and holding them together because we need one another to hold all of that. It's a lot to hold.
So what Hope said about entanglement is what always gripped me whenever I saw this scene. But coming from Ghana, I've always tried to think of myself as an Eastern person living in a Western world, but there's been so much Western influence even in Ghana. One of the concepts that the West struggles with is both and, as opposed to either or. We love to compartmentalize things, and we love for things to be self-contained so that our minds can just identify that and leave everything else out. But when we do that to ourselves, we forget that we're also bigger than our container. I'm bigger than this body. But once I acknowledge that, what about my bigness touches your bigness? And then how far does this entanglement go for good and for ill? In the seasons, we'd love to see a dance that's just winter, just spring, and just summer, and just fall. But the reality is, there's so much entanglement happening now. I mean, I was gardening this morning and wondering about my hostas and how things are a little different from them this year, and then looking at my hydrangeas. And even if you don't look, the entanglement is happening, whether you acknowledge it or not. So while it might be painful, it might be more painful down the road, 60 years down the road, to acknowledge a reality too late when it's waiting for you to see it and acknowledge it and then respond however you can.
And with that, we will go to our next season of summer.
Truth be told, with a click, we change the channel, turn the dial. In our clicks, we turn our backs on those outside. Does a cliche say enough to turn the tide? Lips unclean say next to nothing, amplified. Amplified by generation after generation of silent serenity. Dressed up in duplicity, still unmoved by anything in life's long, lucidly dreamed escape from reality. Truth be told, we will not be moved by the scream we hear until we discover the scream is our own. Until then, these screams that go unheard match groans that cannot be uttered. By breaking bones that burn as creation moans and mutters. Deep down, our souls soon learn to shoulder the darkest matter, the weight of wages earned by seeds unsown but scattered. So if, by chance, our hearts happen to be moved, it is only by grace, and even then, our pace is glacial. Surely, but slowly, at best. Our place is saved here, lower than angels, no less. But are we safe here?
Together. On trailheads that meet rivers and cross gullies to become canyons, in small valleys that rise up and form ridges to birth mountains. Nature repeats the same message in every dimension, in atoms and in universes. Waves are droplets, and gusts are little breezes. Storms are wind and water in passionate alliance. The small always come together to become the massive and the magnificent.
Language and sentience. The Word was born breathless, a tuft of silt and sorrow. The Word was born fierce, green and screaming, wears taffeta, high heels, a red dress, shimmering, is the stuff of bees and finches, ecstatic din of flight. The Word is careful, delicate, a body plundered. Too many times words are imperfect V's of geese and the booms of bullets as they're blown out of the sky. Words were born gates, gardens of boats, stars and mud, ravens and swans circling as the slow tangle of dawn, tender and wild, swings in the fields. And the Word is scent, heat and jasmine that calls and calls to fox and deer who still their tread, turn their heads as the slow miracle of morning matters inside them.
Kamana, could you talk to us a little bit about what political and economic fires the poem is referring to?
I think there were many going on over the 2 years of the pandemic during which I was working with you guys. So it wasn't just climate change. There were political things going on related to gender and race and nationality. They were not new things. I mean, these were old wars being fought on new terms. And I had my children aware of these things and asking questions. And coming from a country where, I left Ghana in '79 after what I think was the third military coup, and I never thought that I'd have to talk to my children about civil unrest in the same context as what I remembered as a child, especially in a country where most people in Ghana thought of America as heaven, where all things were made right. But there are human beings here too. And that's why we're in the situations that we have been in for the last, 250 years. So there are no new political fires that I'm talking about, no new economic fires. It's still the haves and the have-nots. It's still, who am I better than? Who do I want to be better than? And how do I maintain my lifestyle and make as few sacrifices as possible? I think those are the fires that matter the most to me.
Thank you. And I love how you weave it in so beautifully. I think it really helps us to stand up and listen. So thank you. Fun guys, so this poem is all about together. And then we just talked about bringing things together. So I just couldn't help but think of I loved how the imagery and the visualization of these little things becoming massive and powerful things. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Thank you. So the idea of this poem it's inspired by the impossible mathematics of little things. If you think of how, a big storm, a wave, or whatever it is, it's all these little things working together, right? Coming here from Amherst, I drove past the Oxbow, and when I did geography at school, my teacher told me how the river curves and the water eats away at the land until it cuts itself off. Right? So these are all these little droplets just working together. And I just started thinking of how we as human beings achieve things together. I was listening to TED Radio Hour the one day, and they interviewed, his name is Harari, I can't remember his first name, and he wrote this book, is The History of Homo Sapiens, and he was talking about how the thing that has led to our progress as human beings, the sort of progress we see, is not so much that we are clever individually, but that we can come together, and you're good at one thing, I'm good at something, she's good at something else, and we build these amazing things. So what is possible? All right. Kamina, you were talking about, love that phrase, when your bigness touches my bigness. It's beautiful. So yeah, I think that serendipity that speaks to what you were talking about earlier.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Lindsay, I counted, you mentioned the word 6 times, so I was wondering if you could talk to us about the significance of the word.
Thank you. 6, whoa, okay, yeah, it was a lot. So, I was thinking about language and where does language come from? And, because I feel responsible as I'm writing, if I'm going to write, how do we think about this? And language ultimately comes from organic matter. because consciousness had to rise from organic matter. And we are consciousness, and we're trying to be more conscious. And I also, as a poet in residence for the Episcopal Church, think a lot about the Word and how the Word has become owned kind of by the Bible in a way. So I wanted to juxtapose that the Word is maybe the Word, but the Word rises from the natural world. That it really is our prayer to the natural world that language arises from.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any questions for the poets or for the dancers? Help me see. I'm going to come closer to see. It's hard to see. Okay. Okay, we're going to go to the next season of fall then.
Truth be told, we are tethered to this earth, but longing for the heavens to swallow us up in the oceans above. For the waters below are defiled, are corrupt by our own hands. We know it is we who become the pollutants that flow through the veins in the blood of this planet. This home that is less than it was when it burst forth and flowed from the mouth of a God some say died long ago. In his honor, or for ours, we give lip service for ours. These days we feign outrage well, casting aspersions and spells. We choke on the very same words a God once spat into our eyes. We clutch at the very same pearls that we once cast to dogs and swine. Having these treasures in earthen vessels, we drink the dregs of what our God left us. Though our mouths open wide, still our hearts close too tight for the water of life to first bubble, then rise. Truth be told, we should know we are the bottom feeders, blinded by specks and beams, some wooden, some light, but neither illuminate the evil in eyes that see only faults in the earth, not in ourselves. Snow falls out of season, just until hell freezes over us all. Heaven lies beneath us, all things being equal. But no, we are not. Truth be told, hope is fleeting. So are we, since no one sees the oceans creeping forward toward our sand-still castles made with playthings lent from heaven. Truth be told, creation grieves, and we should. Well, all things being equal.
Long distance. If day and night, having known each other for so long, thought it finally time to have some intimate hours, that would be the end of everything. What day knows in her love for night is that they must continuously give way to each other. Their love is about staying apart. They show honor by bowing out and stepping in, always one without the other. If the sun came down to the earth for a closer look at her beauty, he would engulf her before his arrival. Sun and earth pull at each other from 100 million miles for them to have their thing. If the mountains that have always fed the ocean through thousands of miles of streams found that it was too painful not to see her, too lonely to be so far apart, and lifted out of the earth and walked into her expansive arms, that would be the trampling of their endearment and the drowning of everything that connects them. So the mountains in their affection and the ocean in hers hold their rocks and tides and keep their distance and love each other through rivers and rain.
Mountain. I woke this morning a mountain. What I mean is I woke and found my body to be a mountain. This was unexpected and spectacular. A mountain breathing with a four-chambered heart, holding raven sky. I mean, ravens are holding up the sky, and the sky is in my mountain heart, and though my heart has only four chambers, each is infinite and curious. The first chamber holds all my mother's kites, holds my mother's kites, close to my mountain skin, wind, and ocean salt. And as the unbreakable dawn declares herself, I, mountain, am now weeping because I am also a body that is human and very small, with a four-chambered heart that impossibly pumps, holds the strings and sees the streamers of all my mother's kites, boundless as sky and salt, and let's not forget the stars.
Kwamina, could you talk to us a little bit about the line that says 3/5 human? Can you tell us more of what the backstory is on that?
That's a piece of American history going back to the founding of this country and to put it simply, the debate between the slave states and the non-slaveholding states, where enslaved peoples would either count as a whole person or for political purposes count as just 3/5 of a person to make things balance out politically. After we talked about it yesterday, I realized there are moments when you realize that not everyone, even today, is still a full human. Having lived in Alabama, there are poor white farmers in Alabama who don't count for as whole a person as the ones who hold the reins of power in that state. Same is true here in Connecticut, same is true in Minnesota. In every state that I lived in, there are people who exist but do not count and do not have the same value as others. And I think that's why that line seemed important to throw out there, not as an artifact, but as evidence against us even today.
Thank you. And Fungi, we've been talking a lot about bringing things together, but your poem helps us look at the relationship once more at how important it is that love can also be the distance between two different things. Made me think about our relationship with the earth, that we've gotten too close, just like day and night, wanting to spend some intimate hours together. That would be the end of everything, as you say. Could you comment a little bit on that?
Thank you. What does it mean to love? Right? As I grew up, I learned that when you love something, you want to bring it closer, right? And through seeing how love plays out, you want to control it, right? I love that forest, I need to own it, right? I love that beach, I'm going to make it private, it's going to be mine. And so I started wondering, are there examples of love in nature where it's where the message is, it's okay that you're 100 million miles away. I will look at you from here, I will appreciate you, I will work with you, and we will make something beautiful happen. And we see that happen in so many ways. And so that poem looks at how, at that example of love. But then the converse is also true, how as humans, things that we don't trust or don't like, we want to extinguish them. Nikki Giovanni has a beautiful poem called Yellow Jacket, and she talks about how, I think it was in 2006, both her sister and her mother died within the space of 2 or 3 months. And a few months after that, some Yellow Jackets moved into her home. And her immediate instinct was to get rid of them. And then she was just feeling so tired. She said to herself, I've seen so much death this year. I'm just going to let them be. And that got her thinking about how does she interact with things that she doesn't trust, doesn't know well, or is afraid of. And our tendency has been to just totally get rid of them, to other them, to deny them an existence.
Wow. Thank you. And Lindsay, earlier this week, theologian Ellen Davis, she said, land is not an it is a creature, one that we are kin to. And I feel that is exactly what you're conveying in your poem, that there's a connection between body and land. Can you tell us more about your discovery of that?
Yeah, thank you. I feel that relationship is extremely intimate. And in watching the dance and feeling the seasons through the dancers and through your work, that brings for me more how we are inseparable, obviously, from the land. And that poem came from, kind of funny, I woke up one morning and I thought, my body is a mountain. And I thought, what an odd thought. And then, I just kind of went with that and felt this kind of reverence. It was actually soon after my mom had died, rather unexpectedly. And so I think I was needing connection to earth to ground me, to ground my grief, to ground, to feel her. And that experience brought her closer to me. And I think that's why it developed into my heart and all of that. But I do feel that the acknowledgement of our own grief and how we carry grief in our bodies, we can bring that to the earth in terms of how we heal, and only through healing ourselves will we begin to heal the earth. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and this, I think, is part of it.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Well, it has been such an honor to be able to converse with you.
I really want to ask you a question. So I wonder, I know, good try. I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about the origin story of Land and Body and this vision that you've had, kind of the workings of it, where it came from within you as a dancer, as a choreographer, as an artist, as a social justice person.
Thank you. The big question. Well, it started about 3 years ago. I really wanted to do a work about climate change, but it's such a vast issue, and I wasn't sure how to tackle it, and any idea that first came just didn't seem to work. But listening to the music of Vivaldi, which I thought would be a good starting point because it's one that's just so recognizable, and I started the conversation with a friend of mine who's a local composer and talked to him about what if we were able to tell the story of each season and what the extremes are of that season that we're all experiencing. And he was open for that idea and then and jumped in with it and ended up just started processing it. He was on a trip on a plane sitting next to someone who makes organic sounds in Israel. That's just like his job and it was just amazing. They had this amazing conversation and that ended up really inspiring the music. And then we were able to just work closely together. He'd give me a bit of music and I'd work with the dancers and we'd talk about the issue of climate change together. That's what we often do. I don't just throw movement at them, but we sit and we talk about the issue. And it was honestly at a time where our company was going through some major changes and not everybody was even seeing this as an issue that was in the company. So that was also a huge kind of growth experience for our company. So it's been a 3-year process really getting to where we are. And then because COVID happened in the middle and I tried to choreograph online, did not work. And then it really, with the company having the changes, and these dancers are so amazing, and they have thrown everything they have into this work, and it has really come together this year to fruition. And and then really with Reverend Mary, when I shared with her about the whole idea of the work with dialogue and how I didn't want to just present dance without discussion and having conversations, all of these things started budding out of it, which is so amazing. And Reverend Lena had this vision to have this be an entire exhibition and bring in all of her people, and that's where we are today. So it's just really amazing how things grow. Yes, Jill's just going to close us.
Thank you so much to all of our amazing artists this evening. Oh, did you have a question?
Alyssa, were you a dancer before?
Yes, all I've ever wanted to do was dance. I started when I was 5 years old, and that's what I've always done. I'm still a dancer. I don't do it as often. I don't do it like these guys do anymore. I used to, but now I mainly choreograph, but I still dance too. I did get on point, yes. I'd love to. Absolutely. Yes.
I was just thinking about you as a dancer, and I met you, well, I didn't really meet you because you were little, but about 28 years ago. So I don't know how old you are, but you were little. And it's seeing her up on that platform, you were so beautiful and so courageous, and I just want to say that this is a prima ballerina. Beautiful, just beautiful. I was pretty amazed because from the very start, you always operated in excellence. And if I told people about the Christian Academy of Dance, wasn't that what it started as? Whenever I told them, I would assure them that this was not a dance studio. It wasn't a dance school. It wasn't something you just go, pay your money. Not that the kids don't, not like there isn't any effort there, but you definitely were not just a little dance school on the corner,
Thank you.
Again, thank you so much to our amazing artists. Thank you to our audience for your excellent questions. If you want to come back and see Body and Land one more time, It's being offered tomorrow night. There will be the sculptor-artist, Father Sam Fuller, and commentary and reflection by the Reverend Carr, who is a Baptist pastor. There are also 2 opportunities to see the dance company on Saturday, a student performance at 2, and a ticketed performance at 6. Finally, we want to extend an invitation to all of you here to come join us on Sunday morning, where we will have the closing service to mark Body and Land. It will include the Reverend Mary Barnett of Holy Trinity Episcopal Church in Middletown. It will include our Cathedral clergy, Dean Howe and Canon Payares, and it will include the dance ensemble. I'm sorry, I'm gonna mispronounce it. I always want to say Ekklesia dance ensemble. And it struck me as I listened to our poetry and watched the ballet tonight, and as I reflected on the last week of performances, that one of the gifts of art is that it can both confront us and inspire us simultaneously, give us hope in the midst of despair. And it occurred to me that along with faith and community, art is one of the things that helps us to build the resilience that we will need in order to confront the challenges ahead. And so on Sunday, we're going to be combining the big 3: faith, community, and art. Thank you so much.